Welcome, everybody, to another AI in construction. So, for this one, what we're looking to do is kind of start to apply some of the things that we've been talking about. And I've invited a friend, Doug Bevel, who has spent a lot of years in building products, as well as kind of working for some specification companies and some other things. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. What we want to do today is make this a little less PowerPoint heavy, which I'm sure everybody will appreciate, and talk a little bit about how a process, especially a kind of complicated one, that you might already be doing, can be super powered by AI and really compress the time it takes to get something done. So I'm going to kind of play a support role and have Doug um, speak about what he's done in terms of like doing over a weekend what in the past took a lot more time and a lot more money. So with that, Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you to why don't you kick it off with what we're talking about, and again, I'll share screen.
Thanks, Hugh. I mean, my name is Doug Bevel, by the way. My background is, as Hugh said, is I was with McGraw-Hill Construction as an economist for 18 years, and then I went off to run couple of building product companies and then transitioned into the BIM space and then the specification software space. I was general manager of MasterSpec for the manufacturing sector. So Hugh and I hooked up, and we've been talking about. He's been leading this AI charge, which I'm starting to learn a lot more about. Thought I knew a little bit more. I didn't know as much as I didn't know what I know now. Let's just put it that way. The one thing, though, I discovered in the building product space was that it really doesn't change, and I won't speak to the other disciplines of the industry, but it really doesn't change how you on the building product side, especially in marketing and sales, how you approach strategy. You approach strategy from my perspective as success in that space by measuring, the size of the market, how you're positioned in it, look for your gaps, and then look to fill those gaps through better, more robust marketing and sales activities. So what we're going to talk about today is that process. And as Hugh said, this past weekend, I used AI to do something that when I was at McGraw-Hill Construction, specifically Dodge, we used to charge six figures for, and it could take up to a year to perform that. So to start off with, are any of you building product manufacturers? I'm looking at Peter and CC, and I know Todd. So
I think Peter's unmuted, but I
yeah,
can't hear. Peter's not me. Okay.
I'm
Um,
sorry. Yeah, I was going to say we do sheet metal and piping, plumbing, fab.
okay. So what we're gonna talk about is one, first establishing where you're at in the marketplace, which is reasonably easy to do, not the stuff that I did this past weekend. And then move into, and I'll talk about a case study that from my own personal experience, where this analysis led to some big changes in the way in terms of a product that we developed to combat the competition. So.
and before we dive into that, just to generalize it, the point here isn't so much the specifics. I mean, Doug's going to go in and really talk about it, but the idea here is how are these tools emerging? So we hear about models and we hear about AIs this fast or whatever, but what's really impressive is how, and we're going to focus on ChatGPT because it's got the fullest tool set right now, but this is true for some of it's true for Claude and Gemini and some of the others. And I think what Doug used over the weekend as an example was, I believe it was ChatGPT. But the point is not specialized products that some startup has made, but just stuff that you can grab yourself. And the other thing, before we dive in too deep, one of the things that always comes up, especially when you're talking about projects and processes like we're talking about today, that has some sensitive information. So there's always a concern that our information is going to wind up, training someone's model, or it's going to show up in someone else's results. And there's two things to say there. One, I'll show in a second. There are really easy ways to make sure that that data goes nowhere if you're using the consumer version. What OpenAI has just done, literally yesterday, actually, is announce a whole bunch of things on the enterprise side. So they have a tier of um, subscription called Teams, which is purposely enterprise, where the data is much more secure. In fact, they've just layered in some access control so it lines up with how your company does what they do in terms of controlling who can see what. And that matters because it allows you to confidently say, I need you, ChatGPT, to help me to manage the documents that are going to go into this analysis without worrying about it. I hear that literally every time I talk about doing this sort of thing. Everyone is concerned about where their data is going to go. And my answer to that was before, and very much is now, if you trust the terms of service of any other cloud provider, you'll trust the terms of service of OpenAI, and they say we're not going to share your information. But as I'll show you in a moment, when I want to let kind of Doug get us into the process, but I'll show you some things you can click if you're using the consumer one, specifically the temporary chat, to make double sure that that's not true. So Doug, go back into it, but I wanted to say that the folks on the call may not do precisely what you're doing, but we're all doing things about the future. We're creating plans, we're creating analyses, we're creating reports. Maybe we've got a meeting with someone and we want to kind of walk into that meeting better informed than we have really time for. So there's a lot of things, a lot of versions of what Doug is going to do that these lessons apply to, even again, if the specifics of what he walks through are not. But it's really nice to see an actual process instead of talking in abstract. Doug, go ahead.
That's a great point, Hugh. I mean, what I think you're saying is what came to me over the weekend was not specific to what my expertise is. I wanted to see if it would perform what I used to do years ago that took a long time, cost a lot of money, to see if it could do it. So I think just imparting kind of your own creativity. I mean, a lot of you, I mean, you already know how to do certain things in your job that you were trained to do. But what I've discovered is AI just makes those things more efficient. They're faster. You get to your answers faster. So we can just jump into some of the slides here. If you just go to that first graph, the pie graph. So we're going to go in. It's kind of basic blocking and tackling, folks, on the building product side. Is first you want to use what I would say quantitative data to establish, your product footprint. Where is the market for your product? Is that market growing? What in this particular case, when you look at architectural products, the guys say buildings that go up, because I look at these 5 structure types because they consume the most building products. So, as you can see, education, commercial, and healthcare tend to and office and certainly healthcare consume most of that space, with a 5% slice for lodging. Now, this is over the past 3 years. I updated this. So this is like one year I was consulting for a HVAC company who was owned by a European concern, and they saw that this was when we were coming out of the 2008 crisis. And they saw where lodging had grown 30%. They wondered if we should just focus all of our stuff on lodging. And I said, well, no, it's only 5 to 7% of the market. And the only reason it's grown 30% is during the 2008 crisis, they almost completely stopped building hotels. So they built a couple and it gave a nice spike to it, but the potential was really not there as much as it was in these other sectors. So just try to stay focused on making sure you're up to date on how these are performing. Go to the next slide.
Well, actually, I'm going to jump in real quick and use this opportunity to dive into the tool itself, which hopefully folks can see. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Of course, I'm not. So this is just I get Pro. So some of the things that are in here you won't see, but this shows you that if you're using Teams, you will see some of this. So, and I don't mean Microsoft Teams. I mean the ChatGPT Teams, but again, or Pro, and the other one. The point is, you're able to go in here and do what they call deep research. So before you were to create that model, that pie chart, one of the things you might do is, as I say, run deep research. And what that allows you to do, you might say, please show, or please, I don't know, research the relative share of different project types in construction. And I'm just making that up. You probably would come up with a better name. And of course, never. Now, there's a few things I want to point out. One of them is, I mentioned before, see this here? It says turn on temporary chat. That means it's not going to remember anything. So if you're worried about it, that's just another layer you can add. Some of the tools don't work quite as well, but the ones I'm showing you will. The other thing is, it turned it off here, but what they just rolled out over the last couple of days is the ability to do a few things. One of them is go and grab your documents. So you may already have one from last year. You may have downloads of 50 pages of content. So you can go and grab, I'm just going to, I'm not actually going to do it right now, but like, let's say I was going to grab this. This is a spreadsheet, obviously, right? You can now do this deep research. And when they say deep research, it's actually an agent that they rolled out, I don't know, 9 months ago, that will do more than just answer a question. It'll spend real time researching this. So you can have it look at your documents plus what else is out on the internet. The thing that they did just roll out this week is new connectors and new sources. So now you can go into SharePoint or Google Drive or Dropbox, and actually you can connect more if you want. Now, this is the kind, it's a little deeper. It's not very hard, but these are right here and easy for you. You just have to go through the steps of signing up. And if you already have a Google Drive or Dropbox or GitHub, if you already have an account here, usually it's really simple to click on that. I'm not going to do it for this, but it's you've done this kind of thing with Google before. If you've ever connected it, they've got a nice little flow for you. Connecting here, there's a new standard that I've talked about in the past called Model Context Protocol, and it's kind of like an AI version of an API. How's that for a lot of acronyms? But basically, it means it's an easy way for AI to access data and services from other places. So the point in all of this is you now have the ability to not only have this deep research go out on the internet and find things for you, and honestly, it'll take like 10 minutes. It'll go and look at a bunch of things and create a pretty cool report that you can then summarize, because frankly, it usually comes back with 20 pages, or turn it into a chart, or do various other things. And this new integration of sources is really cool because it means, again, you don't have to just use your hard drive. You can go and have it look at other things, whether, again, SharePoint's an obvious one, and some others. And I'll underscore one more time that they're right now using this and really expanding the degree to which these tools are available on an enterprise basis with all of the controls that implies, which I think is enormously interesting. And I think you're going to see over the coming quarter or so, they lean into that more because they know there's just a lot of value and revenue on the enterprise side. So I'll pop back and let Doug continue, but I wanted to kind of start the process of talking about that.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. Let me just get back to the Zoom meeting. Okay, I can't see your slide. Hang on, that's my fault.
You there? Do you need me to reshare?
Keep going. Give me a second. Just go ahead, and I'm trying to get back to the Zoom meeting. I was trying to look something else up.
If only you'd used AI, you would have found it.
I know.
I'm kidding. I can't help myself.
But what I was going to think, if you go into the next slide, Todd, and I can't see it right now, but that's basically a product sales trend for the industry. So what I did was, by the way, this is all free data for you. It's Census Department data, and you can go onto the Census website and you can download Excel spreadsheets, and that's what I do is download those and do some massaging and cut them up. In this case, what I did was not a product demand so much as just a trend analysis where you don't have to have what I'm going to talk about. What I did over the weekend was create a use factor for a building product. But in this case, all I did was take industry data, as you can see, and then I plugged in a fictitious sales data that said, okay, I'm growing my business. As you can see that the orange line tends to have some growth in it, but it's not keeping up with the industry. And I have a specific example of where that has helped me in my career, where I just did a simple, let's look at 10 years of data, throw that up against third-party industry data and see if we're just trending with it. Because what's dangerous, and this was back from 1990 to 2000, I just started running a door hardware company, and they'd grown immensely during the 1990s. The thing was, almost anybody making building products grew immensely in the 1990s. It was a huge growth spurt. What we discovered was that not only they had grown, but they'd lost market share. They had not kept up with the industry. So we dove in to see where we were losing share. And this was commercial grade door hinges. ball bearing and plain bearing hinges, and they are still the highest. They're the market leader, and they're specified on more projects than anybody. But we were not losing the spec market; we were losing the over-the-counter market, and that's when China started bringing in more products. So we were losing the renovation and retrofit business, and we lost it all basically. And they just they weren't paying attention to it, and so we basically that led to the creation of a new product that we could sell against the imports. Because we were selling a ball bearing hinge at that time for about $5.50. China was bringing them in for about $2.50. So in over the counter market where they're not checking on what's in the specifications, they were going for the cheaper product, which is understandable. So that led to a strategic shift, at least with that product line. So as you can see, this particular case, then I drilled down into the case where I've got a fictitious salesperson, Kim Shine. And Kim, you can see we did a 3-year analysis of her territory, see how she was doing. And this is a great thing when you're a building product marketing person to say, hey, this is where we're bleeding a little bit. We can shore that up, and we can understand what's going on, like with the hinge. What's going on? Is there a cheaper product in the marketplace? Do we have some unhappy customers? Do we need another sales rep? Maybe there's just too much business in that particular area. So that's where these analytics can come into let's say a valuable part of your strategy. Any questions at this point?
While we keep talking, why don't I, in the background, hang on a second, let me see if I can, there we go. Actually have it run a question. So what product were we just looking at?
Well, this was let's using ball bearing commercial hinges.
So this is a pretty simple prompt. So often I'm saying you need to do more prompts, but actually when it comes to deep research, you just ask it the question. Looking for sales by, I don't know, sales by channel and maybe region. Let's just see what it says. This is going to take a minute. Yeah,
that wasn't my prompt over the weekend, but
what was? Well, tell me more about what your prompt was.
What is the usage coefficient for ball bearing hinges in the census? I actually gave it the 5 census project types.
Okay. So what is the usage? Go ahead.
So what a usage coefficient, or you'll hear the term use factor, is so if you've got ball bearing hinges of the U.S. market, what is the actual dollar value potential or square footage? I like dollar value because that takes in renovation retrofit. What is the ball bearing? What is the sales, the value potential in a given year or given 3-year period? And then that gives you the size of the market. Then you just simply throw your sales up against that. That's your market share, right? Then if you're fortunate enough to get your competitors' sales numbers, you can actually compare yourself to your competition. So that's what it is.
So for a prompt here, just so we can get this rolling, research the ball bearing commercial hinges market in the U.S. market. What else should I put in here? Or do you want to just stop there? I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. So what is the usage coefficient for each of the census definitions of this market?
I'd say project definitions. Census project definitions. Sorry.
So what's going to happen next is it'll ask a couple of questions for those of you who haven't done this yet. And it'll say, each of these things, you just yes. I'm just going to say yes to all this for the sake of speed. Actually, please include past 3 years or both. So it always does this. It always, even if you're really specific, it is in the back. What we can't see, the system prompt tells it to always ask clarifying questions. So sometimes it's really funny. If you write a really detailed prompt, you're going to get some really goofy questions because it's been instructed to always ask a question. So sometimes it's like, yeah, go ahead. So now what you'll see, and I'll switch it back over, it's going to say we're going to start going. And it'll take, a couple of minutes so we can switch to the next. For what it's worth, Gemini does exactly the same thing. Grok does Claude. Some of the little details are different, but basically what they're doing is the same thing. They've created a model or an agent rather, that'll go out in the internet and again can include documents that you upload. I don't happen to have any relevant to this question, so I'm not doing that, but it gives you an idea of what it has in terms of what it's able to do. So back to our.
Yeah, so this was Kim Shine's sales territory, and in this year between 2019, again, my vision is in 2018, 2019, Kim was outperforming industry, and then she was 2 out of 3 years she outperformed. In 2017, 2018, she was a little below. But what I used to discover years ago when I was doing this analysis, the manufacturer would say, "Well, my best sales rep is Hugh Seaton." And then I do the analysis and I go, "Why is he your best sales rep?" "Well, because he sells the most." Well, that doesn't mean he's getting the most market share. He might have, as sales guys used to call it, a bird's nest on the ground, so to speak. He's got a really good territory. So this helps you get through, hey, Hugh's a great sales guy, but we got another guy who maybe isn't selling as much, but he's kicking butt against our competition. So this gives you the tools to do that, and certainly use factors, which, I used to tell manufacturers, don't mess with that. It's expensive. It takes too long. Just do the trend analysis I showed you. Now with AI, it's within your reach to do. I found a use factor for my products in a matter of half an hour at the most through the prompts that kind of like Hugh was doing. So that to me, there's a lot of talk about how AI can help you get your product specified with architects and things like that. The C-suite at the manufacturers, I can tell you, I was chief operating officer. If my marketing person said, "We're getting spec more because of AI," I said, "Well, that's great, but I don't really care as long as we get spec more," right? I'm not going to get into that, but this kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that gets the attention of the chief operating officer or the CEO of the company, is how we're performing and how we can increase our revenues profitably. So let's move on from there, Todd. Sorry, I'm looking at Todd's name here. Hi, Todd. To you. Okay, let's
look alike.
Yeah, we all have beards. So let's move on. This is strategic analysis using qualitative data, what I call actionable data. So once you find out, where you've got holes, let's look at, two sides here. Let's look at the market and how we respond to that. Another slide. Okay. So I look at the market from a building product perspective, but this applies to the industry in general, between income properties and institutional construction. And when you're working to get specified by architects or engineers, institutional construction, we've all gone through the reality of getting specified and still losing out at the very end of the project because of price, mainly because of price. Now, if you look at the way specs will hold depending on the behavior or the reason for the building. Institutional buildings are being built to do specific things for community, teach kids, heal you, put people in incarceration, public libraries. And the thing that's different with this is they're not profit motives. They're looking for the best products that they can afford, which they've probably already budgeted for. So once the product's in the specification, one of the specified products is probably going to get the purchase order. Okay. On the other side, the income properties are being built with one purpose: to make money, and to make money as fast as you can. So going back to my door hardware experience, we created a lock line to compete with the big boys, the Schlegs of the world, the Sargents of the world. And we brought that product in at 30% below their price. And I found sources in Asia, to make that product. And when we started, we tried to go after, it was in the same month, we went after a high school on a value engineer a high school and value engineer a Las Vegas hotel with some 3,000 rooms. And so we tried to value engineer a high school, which was all tier one, Von Duprin exit devices, things like that. And the owners of the building said, "We're not interested in your lower price. We budgeted for the best. It's consistent with the rest of our buildings in the school district. So we're going to stick with what's there. And, we don't mind the price." On the hotel in Las Vegas, we went in and the building had already let the awards for all the products. They just hadn't broken ground yet, or they might have broken ground, but they hadn't started building the building. We went to the owner of the casino hotel, and with our product at 30 to 35% lower than what they'd already proposed, I think it was like 3,800 rooms, not counting the other rooms in the hotel, the other like the dining room rooms and things like that. They substituted our product in, even though it had already been let, because they were all that money was going to go to the bottom line. So it's good to be cognizant of the purpose of the building if you're working for specification, or if you're not, if you're looking to be the value engineered, lower price alternative. Your chances, if you're going to be the VE product, is better on an income property than it's going to be on an institutional building, because they've already got budgets, and they're looking at the long-term life of the building, to where somebody that in a property, an income property, they're going to own it for a few years and flip it anyway. So, any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay, next slide. So another key area that, again, this is real academic, but it hits home. Building product manufacturers are the only member of the building team who have to deal with every other member of the building team on every project. So you're dealing with go ahead. This is a transition slide here. So go ahead and get them all up. There you go. Thank you. So I break it down into indirect influencers, architects and engineers, and I'll throw in spec writers too. They are folks that can greatly influence what products are going to be used on a building, but they don't buy anything, right? So, you get them, they influence, they include you as one of the specified products. And you know what the value of that is? You get a quote. You get an opportunity to quote, even if you don't know about the project. The GC, the general contractor, is going to look at the spec book and ask for quotes on all the products that are specified. So it's a great way to support your customers, which are the direct influencers, because they're going to get to respond to a request for quote from the general contractor. So when I say direct influencers, they're the ones who are actually making the purchase decisions, right? So they could stick with what's specified, but it could be an income property where the GC says this is way overspecified, says to the distributor, give me some ideas of something where we can save some money. So, but again, when I was a master spec, I would tell the manufacturers, look, there's only one reason you want to be in the specs. The key reason is you're going to get a seat at the table on bid day, guaranteed almost. So spec equals a quote down to the direct influencers, and then it's key to stay in touch with your customer channels. And when I say customer, that's the person who sends you a check. That's the PO, the person who cuts the PO. So,
and while we're on this slide, what I want to also underscore is that in the past, maybe you know who the architect is, and maybe you know a little something about them, and maybe you do or don't know if the engineer is part of the same firm, so on and so forth. What we're in a place now where finding out the everything that is discoverable, you're not going to find out everything there is to know, but if it's out there and it's discoverable, you can do all of that in minutes. So now all of a sudden you don't have to guess, about the general contractor or what subs they're using or whatever else it might be. Is very often you can take some of your own information, which again might be who the subs are or who the key person is, and learn things that are absolutely going to help this process in terms of what they tend to do, what kinds of projects they've done, looking into the individuals, and usually they've got, they've published things or they're on LinkedIn, which, even if you're not signed in, the AI can find out an awful lot. So the cool thing is things that you might have speculated or wish you knew in the past, in 10, 20 minutes, you can go through all of these and say, okay, look, I know more than I did, and I know how to make this, I know how to affect this process better than I would have before with just my shining personality.
Okay. This slide, this is where we get into some fun stuff. So this slide actually is where we're targeting firms that have a history of specifying our kind of technology or using our kind of technology. I always use the term to stay out of trouble. Left-handed widgets, it's just a fictitious building product, and then say, show me the A or E firms that have been specifying left-handed widgets. In this case, if you get a Dodge or a Construct Connect feed, you can take this information and then you can identify the products. I mean, the actual architects and engineers that specify your products. In this case, I've got the incidence rate in the middle, and I've got them ranked by most to least, not to least, but most to lesser, so to speak, and their contact information on their phone. This is great when you're in marketing. It's giving you folks to do your e-marketing to do lunch and learns. And the one thing I will take this to another level, it's nice to know they're speccing your technology. Then you find out if they're speccing you. If they're speccing you, great, send them a thank you note. More importantly, find the ones that aren't speccing you. And then that turns into your marketing target list for lunch and learns and other invitations to attend trade shows, so on and so forth. It's also really valuable with your sales, the head of sales. In some cases, head of sales, head of marketing to the same person. That's convenient. Take this and get it to your salespeople and get a feed to them on a regular basis. Create relationships with those indirect influencers who aren't specifying you for future activity. Okay. Ken, any questions? Nope. Okay. Okay, now we're going to get into some actual tactics here a little bit, or something beyond strategy. So let's go ahead to path to market to mind share. So go ahead. So again, the building team, the BPM or the building product manufacturer is the one who has to deal with everybody on the building team. So go ahead and you can click through this, Todd. It's an animated slide. Okay. Then move on. So this basically the indirect influencers, GCs, subcontractors, and distributors. Go on to the next slide. And so what is mind share? So mind share is a marketing term. And when I was a manufacturer, I'd have distributors say, so how come you're not selling more of my locks? I said, well, because you're not in the specs. And I'm not going to go around, I don't have time to be doing substitutions every time, for your locks. So his thing was get in my face, get specified, then I'm going to think about you, right? So if you get specifier mind share, that's going to lead to a customer mind share, because a lot of the distributors carry competitive lines, and so that's the reason you've got the guy over here picking, who am I going to pick? Am I going to pick what spec to quote? Or am I going to pick something else? You hit some more. So in short, getting down, what are the best strategies for gaining mind share in commercial building products? In other words, keep them thinking about you. One more click, specs, get specified. So I can't stress that enough. In my career, I've seen what it is to get named in the spec. It'll pay off it's hard to get in the specs if you're not there, but once you're in, it keeps paying dividends. So next slide. Okay, this is an animated slide. So okay, so battle for customers' mind share. So this is the distributor or the customer, distributor, wholesaler, and they carry your competition. So this is the thought process. Am I going to quote what's specified my product, competitor 1, competitor 2? So let's say there's 4 products in the spec, yours and 3 others by name, or am I going to VE1, VE2, VE3? So again, good reason to get specified, but once you're specified, you really need to support the downstream supply chain to make sure they have what they need to hold your spec. And depending on what kind of product you manufacture, certainly things like paint and drywall can be more sensitive to VE than some other things like HVAC and door hardware locks and stuff like that. Next one. Okay. Again, this is an animated slide. And this is kind of use strategic solutions. In this case, to use, Dodge and Construct Connect can certainly give you information, but in this, let's move to the right. So, getting into RIB Spec Link with your specifications, Spec Point, RCAT, 4 specs. By the way, we have no affiliation with any of these companies. This is strictly an advice. That's mainly the universe of folks that provide those services. And most importantly, your website, the voice of the customer with architects and engineers, when asked where do they prefer to get product information from manufacturers, the manufacturer's website. They want that to be the latest, greatest stuff. They want to trust that more than any of these other sources. And then you need to be able to, once you're in one of those, you can measure your spec rate by going and getting into a Dodge or Construct Connect service where you can, again, I walked you through technology, brand, competition, market specialties, market specifically, architects, engineers. You could go right to them because you'll have their names and their contact information. So kind of redundant, but again, pushing the lunch and learns, pushing just the relationship building that you can do by getting the right information.
And just to take a quick aside, hold on. While we were waiting, this went ahead and created the report that we were talking about. And what's interesting is, I don't know if I can unpack it. It looked at, 28 sources. It took about 10 minutes, did a bunch of searches. This is actually, you can output as a PDF if you want, which is fun. Send it to somebody, which is also kind of helpful. But what often happens is you say to yourself, this is really cool. And when I've got 45 minutes to an hour to read it, I'll definitely get in there. This is actually a little more concise than they sometimes are. I actually separately on my phone had it go and do a pie chart for me. So let me just do that again here. So please create a pie. I don't know why I didn't do it here, but pie chart. So what's funny is I was monitoring this on my phone, on my app, while we were talking about other things. Pie chart for the key data in here. So a lot of the processes and a lot of the steps that Doug was talking about, what I'm doing here with deep research can help you with that. In some cases, you're using proprietary information, which can wind up, adding to the quality of what you're doing. But the point is, it'll do a lot of the legwork for you. Use shades of blue for clarity. Whatever. So it'll take a sec to do that, but it'll be pretty quick. Actually, that won't take 11 minutes. So going back to Einstein, which is always a good place to go next.
That's you. I mean, this is getting more into your stuff now. So what I really appreciated working with Hugh is I've been around for a long time. I've been with the software companies, and certainly coming out of the BIM environment, I ran BIM Object for a few years. There's a lot of I would say overpromising with technology, and with AI especially, there are a lot of startups, VC backed startups, are coming around to the manufacturers because manufacturers tend to have larger budgets and buy multiple marketing resources, and I was trying to get a reality check on what AI is capable of doing, and I had my own druthers because I come from the data side of things. And my understanding of AI is that it's only as good as the data that it can learn from, like we're seeing here. And if that data is dirty or if it's not well organized, AI is going to, as Hugh has told me, it's going to give you an answer, even if it's wrong. So that's where you have to be careful. Like even the stuff I did over the weekend where I got a use factor, I had to develop I worked with it. My answer was much shorter, Hugh, than the one you got.
Well, I use the deep research, which is the point. So what's interesting, and again, this is kind of new, is your ability to now have an interactive chart. So it's live and you can use it in a presentation. I said, hey, can you make these? It changed it for me, so it updated it based on a question. I requested that it make the numbers bolder because they were a little bit faint. But also you can go in here and do some interesting things to recolor it live, which again is kind of new, I love that. So the point is, like, this is all stuff that if you were going into PowerPoint or using Excel to make these charts, this takes a while. I'll say with a little bit of humility here, because I've done this stuff a million times. Now all of a sudden you're able to do that, and actually I can download this chart as well. So the point of a lot of this stuff is to say you now have tools that automate a lot of the low-level stuff that drives you nuts. And actually, I don't know about you, but there have been reports and analyses I've done where I spent 2/3 of the time messing around with formatting and messy little things in PowerPoint to make it work, where you can just do this right away. And again, I can just download it as probably a PNG, but the point is it's an image that I can just download, which is amazing. So now all of a sudden, this thing, while we've been on the phone, this went and got the data for me. Obviously, you're going to eyeball this and look at it. But now it's of course in billions, and I could turn around and say, please change the numbers to numbers. It's taking me longer to spell it than to do it. To percentages that add up to 100. So now it'll go in and swap that out if that's what I was looking for, because you may want absolute numbers. I find pie charts usually you're really looking for relative amounts as opposed to absolute amounts, whereas often a bar chart is better for absolute numbers. Yeah, Todd just mentioned something real quick. It's a lot faster and cheaper than analysis by data providers. An interesting point there. When I was at Sony, I was not building products, but we were selling products. We often would get raw data from data brokers, and they would very often have a pretty bad tool to do things, whether it was visualizing or analyzing. And I found often I would be exporting their data away from their tool. This is what a nerd I am. And turning it into doing my own analysis with Excel. Well, now all of a sudden I can upload this from Excel. This is funny. It didn't actually make it. Oh, there we go. It added the percentages. Okay, fine. Like I would have to go back and say, hey, do me a favor. I want to add the percentages in there. But the point is it did the work. It's just I'd have to clarify what I mean. So the point is, these are just the little things that drive you nuts when you're trying to tell a story. And in the course of 15 minutes, we went from 0 to having a chart that might have taken you hours otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that when we got into the process I showed today, this is a process that I've been practicing for years, and to this day, it's the most effective way to run your building product marketing department. But you have to be trained to do that. And now AI on top of your training makes it more efficient. That was my experience this past weekend, where I tested it to see if it could do what I thought was one of the more technical things in terms of getting to a use factor. And it took me, I'm trained on how to ask the questions because I know the nomenclature and I know how to apply it. But that training on top of AI, I did in really an hour and a half. I got a full study on one product.
Well, and interestingly, in today's world, you also could turn around and say, show me the steps for how to do something. Mm-hmm. So you can actually get somebody junior to do this for you by saying, hey, go run this. Go to ChatGPT, figure out how to do it, check in with me to make sure that the steps are there. I'll correct it for you, then off you run, and then we'll go back and forth, which is, the classic way that you manage junior people anyway, where they can go do the research and figure out the steps without you having to go through it for them, and they can learn to do this for you, which I really like because it's a blend of the benefits of experience and knowing how things should be, but actually having someone and go do it, learn themselves as opposed to just following, and executing your orders. So at a time when everybody's worried about AI making people, less critical, less good at their job, actually what you can often do is, as the senior person who knows the steps and has the judgment to see whether things are going the way they should, you can often say in a much shorter kind of instruction, is go get this done, go on ChatGPT and ask, or go to AI and ask this what the steps are, check in with me at steps, and we'll do it together, which is really exciting because, again, it means that you as the senior person can have 3 of these running at once instead of needing to focus all your time on doing it yourself. And then again, this kind of a chart, you could very easily inside of ChatGPT not only create it, but then manipulate it so that your colors are the way they want, the perspective is the way you want, all that stuff. So really, the point of today is to really illustrate how the tools that are literally a click away automate and or really augment your ability to get done what you need to get done, so you can spend your time focusing. Like the point that Doug made before is the magic is when you say, I went and spent X amount of time finding out how we're doing compared not to our own sales and how wonderful we feel about ourselves, but actually let's get some context and benchmark. And all of a sudden you're saying, hang on a minute, we're not doing as well. Why are we not doing as well? And you found out through some other, and again, ChatGPT and or AI could help with this, you figured out why you weren't growing versus the rest of the industry, and you found out that actually a totally new entrant had basically taken over one of your channels, which then led to you saying, let's create a new product for that channel, which was the over-the-counter, and you recaptured market share. And actually, I believe what you were saying is it netted out being profitable because it contributed to fixed costs, which is,
Right.
I mean, that's the difference between manufacturing and construction very often is the economics are just really fundamentally different. And one of them is this idea of fixed costs, where even selling at an economic loss is sometimes worth it because you're paying for your machinery and you're fixed, which just is really not as big a deal with a service business like construction, which frankly, people don't think of it as a service business, but the economics are very similar.
Yeah, the profit and loss statement side of that is over a couple of years, we increased our production by 30% in that particular, that area that we lost in the over-the-counter market. And everybody thought we went to China, and we didn't. We just kept making the hinges in the same plant, just changed the logo die. And that's just a great product, a great case study story, and one using macroeconomics to identify that situation, then use, hey, we got a gap. What's the reason for this? Went around to our distributors. They said, we're not, over the counter, we're selling this new a few China brands in over the counter market. So then we matched it and we increased our profits.
I think that brings us to our end. Are there any questions from our massive audience? Awesome. Well, Doug, thank you for this. I think the real point of this was that as we think about some of the more advanced managerial things that go into running businesses, the ability to find the information you want, turn it into something useful, and then analyze it is just a step change from what it was before. And what that means to a manager is things that you could only do once or twice, you can now do 20 different times with different variables or different assumptions or different data sets, different cuts of the data set, so on and so forth. And as you pointed out with that, the over-the-counter analysis, often it's a different way of looking at the data that will show you opportunities or risks. And again, the ability to do this in such a quick, automated way really opens up the ability to understand your business from angles that just were not economic before, but now are.
Yep, I agree.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks
thank you all.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Great
guys.
job, guys.